the approval of the agenda. Item is the approval of minutes from February 13th, 2024. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes that were not already communicated to staff?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion?
A second.
Seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. As we don't have a consent agenda today, we'll move on to the administrative session. The first item on the, consent agenda, we don't have any items for the administrative, correct? And then we'll move on to the legislative session. The item on the agenda tonight is Western Paving, Inc. requests an amendment of the official zone map to apply the materials processing and storage to parcels as listed, consisting of 13.6 acres located to the rear of the existing Western Paving operation at 2021 South State Street. And that's going to be presented by Director Yost. Turn the time over to you.
Chair Baker, Commissioners, thank you. I'm going to start off with an area map. Generally, in a general view, this is I-15, 1600 South, SR 51, 89. The orange parcel highlighted is the parcel that is the subject of the requested zone map amendment. And the existing operation for Western Paving is highlighted here in red. And then this is zoomed closer in, showing the immediate surroundings. The tonight's item, to me, really raises two questions. The first question is, does the request meet the requirements of the materials processing and storage overlay? And second, does it comply with the Dry Creek Community Plan, which is the adopted plan for the area? Questions that I'm not specifically addressing tonight include whether the existing site is in compliance with adopted operating regulations, whether neighbors are being impacted by the existing use, or whether the existing use or the company itself is good or bad generally. These are all legitimate questions and are appropriate to considering the requested amendment, but from the perspective of staff, the questions of whether it complies with the requirements of the zone and it complies with the plan are the first questions. If there's a desire on the part of the Planning Commission to analyze changing the plan to accommodate this use, then that's really where the conversation of the use's merits of the use on its own merits would really come into play. If it's determined that there's a reason to amend or to alter the plan as it's currently adopted, then we really want to engage in those discussions to determine the best outcome. Do you have a question, Brett?
Yeah, so can we go back to your first page?
Mm-hmm.
Mainly that first question that you're not addressing. Why would we not address that one? Sorry, I know you kind of explained it there, but maybe I wasn't.
Because we really don't have any purview here to do anything about that. That's really a zoning enforcement issue. And like I said, you could say, hey, is the existing site behaving properly? Does that affect my decision whether I'm for or against an expansion? Perhaps.
It would for me.
Yeah. And staff's perspective is that we don't need to discuss whether it's good or bad or it's impacting or it's not impacting until we decide whether it meets the plan or not. And if we don't want to change the plan, then we'd go and decide if this is a good thing to change the plan to. But that's just my rubric I'm using.
Okay. So we have no data on that at all?
We do know that what's been reported to me by our stormwater protection coordinator is that on one or two random site visits, it appeared to be in compliance. We have not gathered substantial data, nor do I think we've probably done as good a job as we could in monitoring and verifying compliance.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
mostly state regulated too, though, right?
Much of it is, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
You're welcome. And I also wanted to make it clear as we're considering these questions that this really, to me, just is an objective question as to whether or not it meets the plan, and there's no inherent agenda or opinion on behalf of staff as to the operation itself or the operators, the owners of the business. The history here is really important, and I'm going to show you a series of aerials, not to highlight any specific element or to call any specific property owner out, but simply to show how quickly changes happen and how important it is to make well-considered and intentional choices about planning so that we can protect our ability to make decisions in the future. So we're going to start with an aerial from 1993 and then just slowly work our way up. In 1993, essentially all of the area here except maybe a little part of the current driveway of the Western Paving site was pretty much greenfield. It may have, looks like maybe the city was doing some stuff over here at that time, but generally undeveloped except for, incidental uses. But as we progress through time, we see the site and surrounding areas quickly change and fill and be impacted by expanding development and expanding use, especially over the past decade where we've seen the Western Paving site and sites to the north greatly expand their operations and their grading of the site. Up till we get to about 2019, which is when the materials processing and storage overlay was amended, and then up through the following years up to a current aerial where the operations have expanded to the rear of the property. So things change quickly, and the decisions we make have impacts, and even though we may view this plan as the Dry Creek plan as something that's in the future does come quickly, and the purpose of planning is to prepare for that anticipated future. In terms of the material processing and storage overlay itself, it was adopted in December of 2019. That's the actual zone. The zone map was amended in February of 2020, so this is one of those interesting issues that was really heard by two councils, as there was an election that seated a new council in the beginning of 2020. So one council adopted the ordinance itself, and another council made the zone map amendment. It was really specifically implemented to accommodate non-permitted use that was already occurring on the site. The applicants extended or expanded their use, as we can see in the aerials, and that additional property is not zoned for materials processing and storage. And so the applicant came in and requested a zone map amendment for that property to apply the materials processing and storage overlay. So the first two of the analysis questions that I'm choosing to frame my presentation around is, does the request meet the requirements of the materials processing and storage overlay? The first requirement stated in the code is that it can only be applied to property within the light industrial manufacturing zone, east of 950 West, south of 1600 South, and west of SR 51. And it does meet that. As an aside, this area is also completely within the area regulated by or covered by the Dry Creek Community Plan or the 1600 South Plan. So from a staff perspective, we are actually considering that it would probably be best practice for us to remove this ordinance from the code for reasons you'll see later.
Remove the one that was.
Remove the
replaced
materials
in
processing
2020.
and storage, correct. The procedure for applying the zone is the same as amending the zoning map for any other reason, and they have followed that process, and that's why we're here today. The third is that each parcel shall have frontage on and direct access to a major arterial road. This parcel is actually landlocked, and there's 3 parcels that are the subject of this zone map amendment. That could be easily remedied by combining them with the parcel with frontage and direct access, but in its current condition, it does not meet that specific requirement. The second question, does it comply with the Dry Creek Community Plan? And just for all of our benefit, the plan is the adopted policy and vision of the City Council. It was recommended by the Planning Commission and adopted by the City Council last year, and was also the result of consultation with the public and with property owners. The regulating plan, or essentially the future zone map adopted by the Dry Creek Community Plan, lists has 2 different character areas that we talked about as we adopted it. The parkway or corridor area and the secondary or town center place. The site, the proposed or the subject property tonight generally falls as accurately as you can on a map like this in this area. And so it includes a number of different specific future land use districts and lies pretty centrally to those. So the Dry Creek Community Plan designates the subject property as a town center place type. So that's that general big blue line all the way around the whole area. And that place type allows for a wide variety of building types, including civic, commercial, and residential. And that's kind of how the area in the south adjacent to the property is designed, in that it has more of a village center core that then tapers into residential, and then this village kind of mixed use product or land use district along 51.
And the current zoning is what?
The current zoning is light industrial manufacturing.
So it just doesn't meet all the requirements for that, though, right?
It doesn't meet the requirements for the overlay.
Yeah.
Correct. So materials processing, storage, those type of things aren't permitted in the base zone. So the following land use districts are applied to generally, again, these are kind of bubble diagrams, but there are probably all of the housing types and the commercial village mixed along 51 that fall within the subject property. And this is the use table from the 1600s, or the Dry Creek Community Plan. And nowhere on the use table is anything really in the category of a heavy industrial or a materials type of use that is requested in the zone map amendment. There are some office and craftsman industrial kind of, can't even think of the cottage industry type of things that would be permitted in there. But generally, even office warehouse or in manufacturing in enclosed buildings, like clean or light industrial manufacturing, isn't permitted generally in this area. So it's not simply a question of if one of the bubbles on that land use diagram needs to move a little bit one way or the other. It's just there's no provision in the plan at all to permit the requested rezone use. So it's the proposed use requested by the rezone is simply just not included in the general place types established by the plan. It's not permitted with any of the land use districts assigned and created by the plan, and it's generally incompatible with the proposed plan generally. It's not a use for which, or not a use that's compatible with close-in industrial, public, kind of civic uses, and that's acknowledged in the current zoning, which requires certain activities on the site to be held back either a minimum of 600 and possibly up to 1,000 feet from residential uses. So applying this type of use in the middle of that community plan area would have a significant impact on the ability of other parcels in the area to develop according to the plan. So the alternatives, if we're interested in accommodating the request, the way forward would really be to change the plan, change the Dry Creek Community Plan. There are some risks with that. It would potentially pave the way to making the zone map amendment. But first, I think it risks negatively impacting public trust in making a substantive change like this to an adopted plan so quickly. And it also puts at risk private investment that has been, and private property interests that have been following this planning process for the past 4 years and are planning to improve or develop their property in compliance with the plan and have expectations in that direction. It has potential to risk that. So our simple recommendation from staff is to recommend denial of the zone map amendment, specifically for those reasons that it's just not compatible with the plan we've adopted for this area.
So are you also, I mean, you mentioned this, you also recommending that the overlay be removed? Or is that not happening tonight?
No, that is not
Intend to request that in the future?
correct. We would, it would be our
Just
intention.
the overlay, right? You wouldn't take away the LAM?
Probably not at the moment. We may move on that following up to that, but we're still working on the zoning to really implement the plan and don't feel a lot of other development pressure in the area.
Is something like that precedented in the past? I mean, when someone has a business going in a piece of property and the city's approved, whether it's an overlay or just a zoning deal, I mean, have cities just gone in and said,
Okay, I understand the
we're
question.
changing the zone to
The changing the zoning happens all the time, but we
even when
can't.
someone's business is going.
Correct, but we can't take away the use. We change zones, like when.
So they would continue.
Correct.
They could continue to do
Yes.
the business they're doing today, but we
Yes.
said that's basically
A grandfathered use.
in.
Correct. We can't go in and take away their
Okay.
land use
Making sure
right to use that property in the way that's been approved. No. But we do have similar businesses all across the city that are operating in areas that once allowed that but no longer do, and there are special provisions related to those. But they could continue their operation indefinitely on the current site. Are there any other questions for me? If not, I'm sure the applicant is here and ready to make a presentation.
Thank you, Director Yost.
Thank you.
If the petitioner is here and would like to speak for a few moments, then please come up to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Ben Shepherd. I'm the Vice President of Western Paving. That was hard for me to hear because I just wanted to express what Western Paving is to me and to 200 other employees. It's a home, and it's always been Springville, Utah. That's our home for business. And we have probably more than 50 of our employees live as Springville residents who live here and raise their families here. And I live in Mapleton, but I spend all my money in Reams and Walmart and stuff. And listening to this, I just want everyone to know that it's important for us for the Dry Creek development to grow and for that property to be used. It's valuable property. As for us not being compliant because of our neighbors, we have plenty of neighbors that we communicate with that are we work through things with, and we're willing to have a friendship there. Other neighbors, they don't come to us. But for us, the overlay expansion would move us a little bit further away from any homes that are residents where we're at, and it would just help us to be able to keep progressing forward with the recycling of the material. There's a lot of projects, the interchange that's going on. There's going to be like a lot of concrete and asphalt that needs to be recycled, and all that aggregates will go, again, be sold, taxed, and that will come into Springville City, and it's all used on projects all around this area here. And so I want it to be approved, And I want you all to know how important it is for many people, employees, families, that this is a key to a key to business for us. It helps us to stay strong, and it was interesting watching the maps come up over the years, and it looked quite beautiful to me. It looked like growth, it looked like development, and it looked like a business that was thriving. And so we appreciate everything that Springville does for us. And Brent Sumption is going to speak a little bit more intelligently. You probably know him. I just want to introduce myself and say thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Would it be possible to plug this jump drive in and show some pictures?
Charlie, that's why we asked for materials to be sent to us ahead of time. Let's see.
I know he had a worm in there. He's planning on transferring into the network.
The computer that runs this used to be right here under the lectern, but now it's a remote computer that handles all of the broadcasting as well. So I am not sure that that's something I can do. Let me. There you go. More in luck.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Again, I'm Brent Sumption, and I did the presentation for the permit overlay of the original 8-acre parcel. What was it, 4 years ago? So very familiar with, and I happen to be the father of my son who owns the facility. Western Paving Inc. has a lot of infrastructure development capabilities, utility adjustments, concrete curb and gutter. They do slip forming, they do demolition. They also do volumetric concrete mixing. A lot of that work that they do is done on the freeway to repair blow-up sections of concrete pavement on the freeways. He has also added underground electrical there, and as Ben mentioned, is now employing over 200 employees. This is the gate entrance to the facility. As part of the improvements that he was required to put in, this barrier wall, along with the landscaping that is out in front. This is kind of a north view of the frontage, showing the office building and then the wall and the landscaped area. This is more of a south view of that same frontage. All of this frontage I'm showing is adjacent to SR 51. This is a view of the shop and the office that was recently built. This is a $3 million improvement and expansion of the business. This is a view looking west from the shop and the office, from the front of the shop and the office. Previously, where those two stockpiles are is where the crusher was sitting, and there was much more substantial stockpiles there. All of that has been moved over the kind of the ridge there out of sight. And so as far as the neighbors are concerned, it really has added a positive thing that most of the material processing is now out of sight from that easterly direction. This is a view of the property to the west of the Western Paving boundary, and that's kind of southwest from there. This is due west. This is northwest. I believe one of those aerial images that Josh showed almost the majority of that land west of this fence boundary was underwater at that time. And what we've found is that the water table is extremely high on the property. We recently dug a test hole. You see a little blue square there, just outside the 8-acre processing overlay area. That's where the test hole was dug, and this is what we're seeing there a week ago. At the water level, the groundwater elevation is within inches of the original ground surface. This has had a couple of feet of granular material added to it to stabilize it. But yeah, even this area has a very, very high water table. So the current overlay area, the 8 acres, because of the new shop and the parking area, have taken up much of that existing overlay space. And Western Paving needs this additional 14 acres to provide the area that they need to accommodate the expansion of their, or the enlargement of their business. It's an affordable place to dump recyclable concrete and asphalt. Without it, the nearest alternative is a paste and recycle facility. They charge more money, and it's a much greater distance to haul, and that's a huge factor in the cost of getting rid of concrete and asphalt rubble. WPI provides competitive products and services that are needed for our community, county, and state, and infrastructure maintenance and development. All these products are used for residential and commercial construction in this community. WPI provides over 200 high-paying jobs that are suitable to sustain a family, which includes health insurance and retirement benefits. I know the city welcomes businesses all the time, but unfortunately, a lot of the businesses that come into the city are just a little over minimum wage and really don't have wage rates that can really sustain a family. But all of these jobs that Western Paving provide have that advantage. WPI pays sales tax on revenues from material and product sales that help support the city revenues. Everything that's sold outside, the aggregates that are produced from the recycling, the concrete blocks, all of those products, sales tax is charged on, and the city benefits from a portion of those sales tax revenues. An important thing to consider is that this additional overlay area enables Western Paving to move the crusher even farther away from the closest residential neighbors. And that puts it out of sight and also diminishes the noise issue. Right now, where it is, kind of down over the hill, you can't even really hear it from the road. So it really is a benefit there. Industrial zoning is the highest and best use of this land, is what we believe, because of the very high water table that exists everywhere west of, on the western portion of this property and further west. Water tables were right near the surface, and in fact, as you noticed, again, from that aerial image that was just shown by Josh, a lot of that was completely underwater in that picture. So in addition to the water issue, the soils out there are extremely heavy plastic soils. They are almost equivalent to bentonite clay. And they really make an excellent pond liner. They're such a dense clay. So what happens in seismic activity is when the ground starts to shake, liquefaction occurs, and it makes it so that the ground just turns to jelly. And to build structures on it it requires a tremendous amount of expensive import of granular materials, the type that actually Western Paving is producing. The very product that they will need to develop that area is what Western Paving is generating and producing out of in their recycling process. So what it does is the need to put thick layers of granular fill out there to build residence on it runs the price of residential construction tremendously. Those existing soils will not grow anything but salt grass and maybe bulrushes. And so any home building out in that area is going to require the import of every pound of topsoil that's going to go in every yard. And by the time you factor in all of the import of granular borrow topsoil to develop a residential building lot, you now know why nobody has built out there to this day. You know, nobody's built any homes out there. Everything that surrounds the WPI property is industrial. All of our neighbors are industrial except to the west, and that is agricultural. So we submit that the highest and best use for the property is an industrial or agricultural application. What we're finding, and we're always looking for industrial property throughout the county and throughout Salt Lake County. My son, who owns Eccles Paving, recently bought 3.5 acres not in downtown, but kind of in the industrial section of Salt Lake. Cost him $1.5 million an acre. And right now in Utah County, you just can't find it. Industrial property is almost impossible to find. And when you do, it's $500,000 an acre here in Utah County. So with the approval of this overlay, it literally gives it an industrial application that will increase the property value and therefore the revenues to the city from property taxes. I realize that it's a small portion of those property taxes that actually come to the city coffers, but those will increase as this is used in an industrial application. So there's a lot of benefits to the city. Again, Western Paving is an asset to the community. They provide services and materials that are used in the city and throughout the county and the state. And they provide tax revenues to the city. I think it is a very positive thing for the city to support Western Paving in their need for additional property area to facilitate the growth of their business. And that's basically it. Is there any questions that any of you might have?
Any questions from commissioners?
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Okay. City presentation and deliver. Okay. Thanks. Okay. At this point, we will open the public hearing. Is there a motion for the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. As the public hearing portion of this meeting, anyone who is in attendance is welcome to address the commission. We just ask that you come to the microphone and state your name and your address, and try to keep your comments reasonably brief to allow there to be time for everyone to contribute to the meeting as they so choose.
Thank you. My name's Tim Parker, 2310 South State. I'm one of those residences that have remained there for 34 years that seem to be omitted. I want to tell you, I appreciate the opportunity to speak for my household on behalf of many residents impacted by tonight's expansion request by MWPI. As a reminder, in past meetings from December 2020, I presented the City Council with a signed petition of over 50 households within a 1,000-foot radius in opposition to the potential MPS operations, the overlay. Many of those came from the 1600 South neighborhoods, along with those on State Street. Since those efforts seem to have been met with lack of attention, I did not recanvass those households, but my opinion is that they still would be opposed to the doubling of the current MPS operations, which you must remember potentially encompass a large amount of the LIM acreage that's now covered by the Dry Creek planned development already approved by the City Council. I also need to add that within mere months after the MPS approval for WPI, a second landowner whose property abuts much of today's request land was denied by the commission, and a comment was made that the direction of the city is now moving in a different direction, and I hope that holds true today. I'm aware that in the past 4 years, there has been a change in the executive office as well as in the commission. My comments are therefore meant to remind or educate this current commission of past decisions that you will now be asked to review and decide if this is the direction you wish to move forward or not. The old adage of the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. That's on display tonight. Also, it's better to beg forgiveness than to ask. It's better to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Once again, Springville's MPS code demands that the stockpiles must not be over 20 feet in height, and I suggest to you that this regulation has been exceeded almost from the beginning of the approval. In my phone pics, you can clearly see that the piles are towering above some very large track hose and conveyor belts. Also, the volume must not exceed 2,500 cubic yards times the number of acreage that it will be contained within. In my opinion, this has been exceeded almost since the approval and should actually be decreased because of the acreage that has been taken out by the prospect of the development of a large structure and the needed parking for any stored equipment. And stored material must not emit dust, particles, dirt, etc. beyond the approved property boundaries. This was always an impossible feat to conform with from the beginning. If you believe that during our frequent high wind events that can physically be accomplished, I welcome you to come out there during those events. I have personally seen a silica-filled dust cloud almost entirely block my vision outside my property boundaries from my backyard. And I know from talking to my neighbors and my RV storage renters that this has not been achieved. They have dust all over their campers. There's a reason that WPI sometimes dispatches a private street sweeper onto State Street. I'm of the opinion that little to no dust abatement processes have taken place on the WPI site. If WPI can prove otherwise, I will say that it is still grossly inadequate in conforming to code requirements. The previously approved site plan required an operational plan from WPI to prevent the silica dust from leaving its boundaries. I do not know if such a plan was submitted or if the enforcement actions have been taken, and perhaps the city attorney could inform us. According to OSHA, crystalline silica dust is one of the main toxic chemicals emitted during the process of crushing concrete. OSHA's list is long, but suffices to say that the dust has been labeled a carcinogen, which can cause pulmonary tuberculosis and other lung diseases such as silicosis. As we all know, most used concrete has a multitude of toxic chemicals spilled and embedded in it over the years of use as well. It doesn't come to WPI as a clean concrete. Although not the same toxic chemicals, I want to refer you to a Superfund cleanup about an abandoned Exide plant in Ohio. The original test indicated that the dust from the plant had polluted the ground of over 10,000 homes within a 1 3/4 mile radius of the plant due to the prevailing winds. I read recently that that estimate has now been updated to show that dust pollution is up to 4.5 miles radius of that plant. At that estimate, I would say that it would almost include the entire city of Springville. As I wrote in an email to you over a month ago and before the 2 continuances were granted, city code requires crushing operations, including storage of the finished product, to be carried out 1,000 feet from any residence. And although it boggled my mind at the time, Attorney Penrod stated that he was inclined to allow the operational buffer, to be reduced to 600 feet, stating that if the operator violated code requirements, his office could take action and change that back to the 1,000 feet. And it also could pursue citations or the removal of a business license. If not already taken, I suggest his office proceed with this enforcement, since it is well documented through the Code Enforcement Office that WPI has and continues to violate many of those requirements. And I heard Josh mention that there was a couple on-site inspections. I have personally talked to Mr. Willardson. I've shown Mr. Willardson, the code enforcement officer, many videos and still pictures of the dust when it was rising. My observations of believed, and that was just from my yard, my observations of believed non-compliance regarding buffer distances can easily be validated using satellite images, although none will show the current status of the most recent piles that have been processed on the unapproved property.
Sir, we'd like to bring to your attention that we are not able to take any action on compliance or conformity issues tonight.
Okay?
Are there comments that you have that are related to the issue that is presented?
I think so.
Okay.
Let's see. I've been told that there is no permit has been filed on the proposed parcel, and yet every inch of that property, as Mr. Sumption mentioned, is filled with concrete, crushed concrete. I have many of those videos and pictures. In fact, all 3 of the requested parcels for consideration tonight fall partially or fully within the 600 to 1,000 foot buffer of my property.
Is that the property line where
That-
you've
that-
got
that is my- that is my
next
back-
to your
I'm
next to
sorry.
your RV storage? Is that
No.
the property line?
No.
Or is it?
Well, it is a property line, but farther down.
from your home?
Yeah, my property L shapes, and so it goes around on that dirt road, the old city road. So it is on the north side of my property. From the north side to the proposed properties are 500 feet. All 3 of them, and one is almost entirely taken up by 600 feet. And since this area now falls under the Dry Creek Development Plan, I ask you to remember that this area has no sewer system and the only partial access to city water and no Google Internet capacity, and we would all like to make this area more inviting for future commercial development as is planned. Any help in these areas will be appreciated. And I believe that's, talking about the water table, my house has been there for 100 years. I can see in the videos or in the pictures where WPI has covered a spring that had been there forever that leads to the wetlands. Another name for high water table is wetlands. That's all I have. You have any questions?
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Phil Hansen. I have property located at 2325 South State. I'm south of Western Paving and on the east side of the road. I am here tonight to try to find out facts and details. Mr. Yost was helpful with some of his comments. but I think there's an extremely large amount of questions that need to be answered here. I somewhat opposed 3 years ago this zoning overlay, even though explained to me in person by our former mayor, Ricky Childs. But I'm not here to cause any harm or damage to any of the Sumptions. I respect their ancestors. I grew up a half a block from some of the best people I ever knew, Jim and Dick Sumption. So as a kid, I grew up. They're good people, and I don't want to see them incur any hardship or in their business. But at the same time, I must say, I don't want my ground to be devalued, especially at this time. I'm a fairly new resident. I've only been here 75 years. But I've been in business 52 years in Springville. Okay, when I retire or sell or whatever happens to me, or keel over and somebody else sells my place, but I don't want it devalued from the point it's at now. Now, I do have both health concerns and I also have the value of properties going down, but my number one concern is health. I have a layman's knowledge of crushing operations, not concrete, but I, as a kid, had to dredge the ponds at Thorn Rock Products in Provo. My father was a superintendent there for 45 years, so he got free labor out of me, slave labor. So, and anyway, at nights, and I hauled from the crusher. Now they're crushing different types of rock, and it contained different sands, different clays, different soils. But we're talking about the silicon dust, and concrete is definitely should be a consideration for health. Now, also, I guess if there's one thing that upsets me, it is that a lot of the older people aren't here that live out in that area, and this happens all over our state, all over our country. Some of them feel, I've spoke to a lot of them, they can't do anything, but their properties are being impacted. Now, I don't want to see them not grow. Everything they've done and everything Mr. Sumption has stated, I think is wonderful. I endorse it. But I think this committee, I think our Chamber of Commerce, and I think any citizens who are invited ought to be able to go have an afternoon or a time to go visit the facility and the plant. I do have some questions about the slurry, where is that? Does anybody ever ask what's being done with that? Where does it go? And the water usage. I know Thorns had their own springs up Slate Canyon, and they had a huge potential of water that they used in, and so I have a familiar how you drop the dust with water. But I think that needs to be seen. Friendly afternoon visit and see the operation. Then we could make a fair and unbiased opinion of the operation. Right now, the dust I'm seeing on all my equipment, my trucks, my parking lot, everything, I do have some concerns. And this dust, whether it comes up at night, and also, with due respect to all parties here, Mr. Parker, I have photographs of big dust clouds coming out of there too. And everything he said is, I validate both sides there. So I'm not trying to stay the middle mediator, but I do not want my property and all the property of people I've known my whole life. This can affect a lot of people, as Mr. Parker indicated. So, and I'd like more clarification from Mr. Yost on the city, on this overlay ordinance. If we expand this time, we're going to be back here in 2 more years expanding again. Now, what is this dust doing to the farm ground, to the animals? Anybody done any research on that? We got any data, anything? I think it's a great operation. I have some of their product in both my business and my own residence. And the crushed concrete is a great way to recycle that. But the question in my mind's eye is this big a plant that keeps expanding belong where it is? Should it be more remote? And I also understand what Mr. Simpson said about vehicles, the petroleum and gas hauling and coming back. So I'd like to see resolve for everybody to where everybody's happy and smiling. But I would like to not have every concern of the residents or of Mr. Parker. They are prospering, helping our community, but I think I've employed a few people for 52 years. And so I don't think this can be a rush decision. I'd like to submit a letter at a later date. I am here tonight just to get what facts and data I can acquire. And I'd like to submit some of my questions which don't just represent me if we need it signed in a petition, but by other residents. I'd like to see that addressed before any decisions are made. If you have any questions of me, feel happy to offer them to me now. I'm in search of a lot of knowledge and a lot of answers. And I hope you, gentlemen and ladies, also are. So that's all I have to say. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I suppose it's a good time to mention that the things that we do tonight are to make a recommendation, which will then go to the city council. So if there is additional feedback that you would like as part of the process after tonight's proceedings, you still have a window for that.
Sure, and I would be happy to take that to the city council, but I think all parties ought to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel Sumption. I had my dad and Ben speak. They're much more articulate, and they have certificates that say I'm 10 times smarter. They're 10 times smarter than me. But I want to get up and say a couple of things. First and foremost, Western Paving was actually established by my grandfather in Springville, Utah in 1964. I've been grateful to take over in the last 20 years and operate that. Had a great relationship, done a lot of work for Springville City over the years. Many, many projects that I'm very, very proud of. That there's not enough time in the day to talk about them all, but we love being in this town, love being part of it. I want to say that standing up here, we are happy to do show and tells with anybody that would love to come down. Some of you we were able to catch, come down, and show our operation. It's made out to be this big bad wolf. Some of you and others over time have been able to stand 50 feet, have a conversation, watch the operation, and very little dust, no dust, and very little noise comes off of that, surprisingly, for some. You cannot hear it from the road. One thing I want to make clear is that the law and ordinance is 600 feet from a residence. We are very far from that. There was miscommunication. It's 1,000 feet without a business license, 600 feet from a residence with a business license. We have a business license. We are running in compliance. This whole thing was created to actually be even better for those that are against it. More out of sight, out of mind. That's how this started. But I would like to invite anybody that would like to come down and see how we run to come see. And we feel like this is a great asset for the Drake Creek community to build that up, to help it get built, versus a lot of the materials we see in Utah and Salt Lake counties are coming out of Grantsville, Utah. They're getting further and further away and more expensive. But I just want to thank you for everything you've done for us. And yeah, my wife and I love running a business in this town. Is there any questions you may have of me?
Just, could you state your address for?
Oh, well, I'd be 2120 South State. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question real quick. So do you have a dust control plan with the state?
Yes.
That's administered by who?
The state, the EPA.
So they do this.
Division of Air Quality.
So they do the inspections and everything else?
You have to have a permit for each
Right,
equipment.
I'm aware of that. I just was wondering if you had a permit in place, and they do the inspections, not the city though, right?
D, both the above. Well, as far as air quality, the state, yes.
The state does the air quality inspections.
Correct. And I will say, we recently, as we built the yard, we built it. I wish we would elaborate on on one of those pictures, but we built a track out that I would dare say rivals, it's better than anyone I've ever seen. We, at the direction or at the request of the Springville City SWIP manager, we have some grading, but we put in some specialized concrete with rumble rocks in there, and then these special grates that collect the mud that comes off. And I will say it's important to us. We want to be good stewards of our community. And yes, we try and go above and beyond to sweep the road if it needs to be, even possibly some other people's messes.
Yeah.
We try and clean up while we're at it. So
But the dust control plan's not part of the SWIP, right?
no,
The dust control plan's administered by the state. That's what I
Correct.
was just trying.
Correct.
And that is in place, though.
correct.
Thank you.
So, sorry.
No,
I just want to
go.
clarify something to make sure I'm understanding this. So before the dirt got moved west,
Yep.
was it east where your building is, where your parking lot is, or was the dirt never there?
So if you look, there's a space between, yes. So it's up on top of the hill, closer to the road.
So by moving it west, people like Phil, for example, he's on the east side of the road. It's actually moved it further away from.
And it's
him,
got it
correct?
off a shelf as well.
It's down off the mountain.
Right. I know it's down off. I'm just making sure that originally it was closer to the highway.
Yes, and we currently have zoning to operate
Yes,
there.
I just wanted to make sure I was,
Yep, we currently have zoning to operate there, and there's quite a bit there, but like I said, this all spurred from a talk of, hey,
Sure.
this would be better. And that's where it comes from.
We will have to move it back up on the higher elevation if this is.
sure, yeah.
And
I just saw some of the neighbors here and some of them left, but it actually moved it away from those residents.
Correct. Yep.
We do put water in it, everything.
Oh, we've got lots of water. The water actually, so the irrigation ponds are fed by the springs that start up on the other side of town. Well, they start up in Mapleton, I think, but big Hall of Water feeds those ponds. The ponds are used for irrigation purposes. We love our neighbors over there.
Is any of the property that you're talking about, is it in wetlands? Is it considered
No,
wetland?
no, we've had wetland engineers come. We've got documentation saying that it's not.
so in the future, if there are residential homes that are built up against that property, do you guys have a contingency plan on what to do with operations? If you end up having homes that are now next to that as well?
I imagine there comes a day where we're not welcome, and we make adjustments from there. I don't.
I can just tell you what, I was recently up in Portland, and Granite Construction had a pit right in the middle of, just away from the airport, but housing all around it. And so they crush every day there with development, property and housing all around it. They put up the barrier fencing all around it. They have good air and pollution systems in place, and they crush 24 hours a day there. And if you stand in the backyard of those residential homes, you can't hear that crusher running. So that's just the experience that I've had, as and that's just recently up in Portland where I was.
So one thing.
They wouldn't be able to do a pit at the home of the water table.
Well, no, but I'm
Yeah.
just telling you that they had a pit with a crusher in there. These guys are recycling. There's not,
It's not that.
It's quieter than a pit because they're not running the machinery to haul into the, dig and move the material up to the crusher. So
So did you go visit the pit?
Yes, I did.
So what were they doing for, I liked Ralph's question about who deals with the environmental protection piece. But how did you observe them? What were they just
Well, on
spraying it
windy
down,
days,
or what happened?
they have a water type system that'll sprinkle on the pit to keep the dust down.
Uh-huh.
And,
Yes.
and they're in compliance there.
Come to the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we could just have the public hearing end, and then
Right.
all the questions you want to ask would be great at that time.
Thank you.
Are you
Thanks,
John
Greg.
tonight?
I'm John tonight.
Okay.
One thing I want to say that's very valuable in the community, as my dad spoke to, we're on the UDOT procurement, we're one of 4 contractors on the UDOT procurement plan. Some of you remember a tank or a mail truck fire that happened, I don't know, in the last month. We are one of only 2 contractors in the state of Utah that we can show up at 10 o'clock at night, shut down I-15, dig this concrete, hammer this concrete out, prep it, pour it back, and have lanes open to traffic at 5 o'clock in the morning. The public doesn't even notice it happens, which is a pretty neat situation. Being further away makes that a lot more difficult, and we feel like that's something really cool that adds to the community and where we're at. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Scott Sumption. I'm a Springville resident. I'm at 1833 East, 200 South. And I would like to just point out or make note a little bit of the city's green waste recycling program. Could anybody speak as to why the city maintains that, supports that?
It's a public hearing, not a Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let me try and answer the question. I think it's obvious that the Springville City leaders have determined that that's a valuable resource to the city. As a Springville resident, I will tell you that I appreciate it a lot. To be able to take my green waste from my home and yard and dispose of it without significant distance to take it to, making it a difficult task. It's a very valuable resource to the community. But obviously it doesn't come without some issues. I know it's a significant expense to the city and not a moneymaker. But yet it's deemed valuable for clean yards and improvement of the general appearance of the city. Concrete's a little bit different. Not every average homeowner generates a lot of refuse concrete, but still there is some, and with the city roads and things around, being able to effectively and economically dispose of concrete and have it recycled to a very usable material is a significant benefit, and have it so that it's close and available to the community. So I did a little checking, understanding this is not a question and answer, but the city's green waste site is approximately 1,000 feet from residences. Does anybody know if the city gets complaints on that?
Not something we could speak to.
Okay. Well, I think that, I mean, obviously if there was a bunch there, that would be, it would be an issue. And we feel like that, and I asked this question to John Penrod, is with the development of the Dry Creek community, will the city respect the same 1,000 feet barrier, what should we call it, zone, buffer zone from our, okay, in order for us to establish our zone, we have to be 600 or 1,000 feet, depending on the business license status, from residences. Will the city respect that with our established zoning with ongoing development. If the city will, we feel comfortable, we can live within 1,000 feet. We can be a good neighbor and can coexist without a lot of complaint. I think that, as has been noted, the two residential and the recycling can coexist peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Not seeing anyone else coming up to the podium, I move to close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, discussion amongst the commissioners. What's the feel on this particular issue, or do you have any additional questions for the staff or the developer?
I think it's really, if you've had a chance to go out and look at the site, it's really more conducive to where that crusher has been moved than where it was before. If you drive past there, they put sound barrier fencing all the way up around their facility. And if you look directly east across the street from the facility, it looks a lot worse there than what their facility does as you drive by it, with or without the ordinance change. So it's quieter. It's more out of sight from the public. If you walk down, Rick Childs has a yard just down there, and there's water just running freely all the way down through his property. So, you know, it's a wet area. And I know that there's some agricultural right next to it with a few cows that are let on it occasionally. So, you know, I don't know at this point. I almost feel like that if this is allowed to be changed, the zoning, and go forward, the problem in and of itself will take care of itself down the road, because that property will become more valuable to sell than it will be to keep and maintain as a crushing facility by the time we get homes and buildings and different things in there. But that's just my personal opinion.
Speaking of that, Josh, I mean, realistically, how far out do you see the city center development start to occur? Because, first of all, I want to just say, I believe in strategy, maybe more than about anything when it comes to city or business. And so I love that we have the strategy in place, and I want to make sure that we do not do anything that would jeopardize that strategy. We have to have that in place, and we've all agreed to follow it. But I'm just curious, how far out are we that you think that this will start to?
I met today with a developer and a designer or an architect planner with representing a company that is currently working with the property owner directly to the west on designing specific plans for development. And they have been waiting for the plan to be adopted and are somewhat impatiently waiting for us to get the zoning on board so that they can move ahead. So it's as imminent as zoning and construction could take it. We're especially on the area that's a large contiguous area owned by a single property owner, which in this area we have a couple of those pieces, and they're since I've been here, I've been meeting with those representatives as they've been trying to advance development.
Plus, they're putting in the new interchange too.
Correct.
So that's going to totally change.
How far out is that, though?
It's
It will be completed. Is it 27 now? Because schedule has slipped.
Every year
I mean, they're under construction. You've seen the Nickelcade building come down and billboards to be located, and they'll be working on those ramps and frontage road realignment. I mean, they're already working on the frontage road realignments. But with the recent action in the legislature to secure some additional funding, it looks like that entire project, including the reconstruction of 1600 South to 51, will be completed in 27.
27.
so it's yeah.
My, regardless, and well, not relating to a value on if it's good or bad or if they're abiding by code, my concern is how it will affect the plan that the city council approved. And, you know, any overlay that we, if we were to allow or recommend that, would be able to stay there in that use on that property indefinitely until.
8.6 acres is gonna be able to stay there as it
Eight,
is.
yeah.
True, and we
So you're gonna.
talking about, well,
They can
I'm
move their
sorry,
1,000-piece boundary on their property line and maintain the existing permitting right where it's.
yes, that is true. But in, again, the discussion of like moving it down the hill, that's moving it away from the residences and from, SR 41, but, whatever the number is, but it's moving it right into an area. I just keep looking at the plan map and where that is in the plan map, and it's medium-high housing. It touches into the housing medium, some of the housing medium below, and that is people having houses even more right up next to that. And I just think of like Ironton and the quarry there, and how there are signs in that neighborhood saying, this is a quarry, it's gonna happen. I just foresee that being signs all around that property saying that this is happening. And that's not, I don't think that's what the vision was for this area when the city council approved the plan.
So considering what Rod said, I agree with what he said. I think right now it's probably the best use of the property that's there. I think it moves it away from the highway that a lot more people go by than probably would be on a single road to the west, even though it would be a neighborhood where more people live. I used to own a home by the railroad tracks. I knew when I bought that home, I knew there was going to be a train go by. And I think that moving it west is actually helping some of those neighbors right now. And someone who purchases that property and chooses to develop it will know, hey, this is there. We'll stay whatever feet we need to stay away from it. Those who choose to live there know what they're moving by. And I think right now it's the best use of the property, and I think it's better. What they've done is better than where it was.
So what is the number, 600 or 1,000?
Attorney,
The business license section establishes a regulation of 600 in the.
So it was not an exception that John
It is
made?
it's not an exception, no, but the zoning code establishes 1,000 foot, so the zoning code is actually somewhat more restrictive, but the business licensing allows that to be closer. But if we do, have, as was mentioned, if there are issues or other compliance related elements, we can change that business license regulation, because the business license regulations don't constitute a land use right like the zoning does, or take any other actions that are generally available under the business licensing section.
sure.
And
Attorney Creer, the setbacks that we're talking about, the 600-foot buffer that has to exist between the uses, does that apply both ways? We had the scenario come up where you have a developer comes in, they build homes right next to it, it's within the buffer zone. Is that permissible, or are both parties held to that same standard?
I believe both parties should be held to the standard. But I think right now the overlay would be the one that, in discussing this situation, is the thing that would probably, it's arguable both ways. So it's not easily determinable.
So they wouldn't be able to build a house within 600 feet of their operations? Or would they be able to build a house but with the setbacks for
Well,
that of
given that a
like,
house wouldn't
say
be under a
30.
business license, I don't think that would be applicable to building a house within the 600 feet.
The one concern I have on this, and maybe you can answer to this as well, is we've made a commitment to landowners and developers and people that are trying to develop that property. And they've, like you said, they bought the land, but the railroad wasn't there. You know what you're saying, Ann, is that I agree with that. You know, if the railroad is already there, but what we're doing is we're taking something and putting it into a plan that was already approved, 4 years ago? And we're saying, well, we changed our mind. We're going to let you bought the property now, and we're going to put, encroach on that more. That's my big concern, is that it was already there when someone bought the land. And I like to see businesses grow too, I know the assumptions and everybody else does, but when we have a plan in place and then we take and change that plan, it can really impact the property values of people, both sides of it. And if we encroach into those areas, whoever owns that property or has bought that property is now, we've changed that plan. Do we have liability for that,
Well, there's always liability. So, yes, I think you do. I think you do have to be careful in making a plan and then changing that, but you have the authority to do that. It would be someone else's question to come in and say, I built this with the intention of following the plan as it was, and now you've changed that. They can make that argument.
But, yeah.
You've got a valid point, Ralph, but.
That's my biggest concern
The
is
issue, or the other side of the coin to look at is these guys already have a permit. They can move that right back up on where it was before, sitting up higher, and it'll be developed, but having it sit up higher, you're going to have a bigger eyesore and a problem than if you allow it to be down low where the wind can't catch it, even though they have.
But it was lower before. So to be totally fair, the property was lower before. And then it was filled with concrete.
It wasn't utilized for this.
No, it was.
Down below was not. Down below was not.
The
Just up
property,
above was.
no, I'm telling you, because I know, because I had someone tried to get me to build down there, and the chunks of concrete that were hauled in and buried, probably before they owned it.
Right, I understand, but
Yeah.
where it is right now is where they have, the height of what it is now is where they've been crushing.
I
from the
understand that
onset.
now, but I'm just saying it did drop off. I
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah,
I've
it
chased
was-
cows through those areas, so.
Okay, well, let's look at
Other-
the situation of where it is now, the proposal that's
Yeah.
here, rather than going back the 50 or 70 years of the property. What the question is it better or not better to fulfill this request?
Right.
Well, and it's an answer to Ralph's question is these people are looking at an investment on where things are sitting now. And that's a legitimate question.
I agree.
The other thing you have to look at though is where if they were to move it down, they have every right to bring it back up on top, and what kind of a situation will that create for the people who have invested in this property?
Well,
Did they know it was there already? Is it an issue for them where it was before?
There's nothing stopping them also if they are granted the overlay to in expansion being down below and having to expand back up top too. So, by allowing the overlay, you allow the potential for not just the upper portion, but the lower and upper portion
That's
to
correct.
be used in those ways. And there's nothing to say that they couldn't just negate those benefits.
No, that's correct.
But also there's the issue of frontage, and so regardless of where the overlay, if it's down below, they still are going to have to be moving things up through and past that upper portion too. So there'll still be trucks coming through and that whole process. So
I don't follow your.
You're saying that the entire operation still goes from the upper to the lower. It's not like it's just at the bottom.
No,
But that's what they want. We want them to be successful, so we don't want to limit that. But the reality is, or the proposal is that if everything's going to be moved off the hill, I mean, the hill can be built up again. You know, that's part of the process. Before we could recycle concrete, before the state accepted all that, coming on board, that was so it's definitely a value. I think that the recycled concrete and they've got a new process that does high strength concrete and that they can turn around. That's what they were talking about. Those are great assets to the state, the city. I just have concern about opening the overlay up in areas that we've already committed to others. That's my big concern, is that.
Well, the overlay doesn't go on to the committed property for the strategy.
No, it
does.
changes.
It
Splits up
overlaps
again.
It
with what
goes
the
right, no,
plan
it goes over
indicated.
here, see.
But-
See, it's going into those areas.
Yeah, but they own it right now, right?
Yes.
So
No, but I'm saying the zoning, it's no different than someone coming in and saying, I want to put a duplex in my neighborhood.
The overlay gives it
And
more
I say, no, the
intensive
zoning
uses.
says,
it's light industrial right now, right?
no, I
Yes.
If we
understand.
do the
that.
overlay, yeah.
Understand.
But the overlay
It bites into that little
increases
piece
the
right there, yeah.
intensity.
Yeah, I mean,
of
it's
the use.
it's changing,
They still have 1,000.
it's changing what our original plan was,
It is.
so.
And I think you can make valid arguments on both sides of this issue. And we've brought up a lot of different points on this. So for me, really what it comes down to is that we could, either way, there are some benefits to either party, but the trust in our community in a plan is what it comes down to for me.
Yeah.
Both businesses and residents need to be able to trust that when we say this is what's going to happen, we're not going to deviate from that unless there's a concern, there's a problem, it's been X amount of time and it's time to reevaluate things. But where this is something that we just did, it's already been evaluated. We've sent out, this is what the plan is.
Yeah.
And people are making plans based on that, and I think that we should stick to that.
Yeah. So 4 years ago, we approved the city council approved the overlay for the 8 acres. And since then, a lot of money has been invested to make it look nice, the walls,
Yep.
the gates, all that kind of stuff. And I think they've done a great job personally
Yeah, I agree.
doing that. And so they've continued to invest in anticipation. And, you know, you can argue that act first, ask permission later. Maybe not, I don't know. But I look at it and think these guys have been pretty good corporate citizens, and I appreciate the fact that they've made that place look so nice. I mean, there's nowhere else up and down that street that looks as nice as they've made this look. So I guess my question is this. Is there a way, because I don't know how far out, if the new interchange comes off and is finished in 2027, and you've been meeting with people, I mean, I don't even know what's going on with Lakeside Landing these days, but that's just continues to be pushed years and years. So I guess my question for the commission would be, is there a way we could grant some sort of a temporary, I don't even know how this works, that we could recommend a temporary fix so that they can continue with their efforts after having invested in the building, having invested in the walls, having to try to really make this thing nice. I'd love to see a way that we could, at least for now, allow them to continue business. And, you know, maybe there's some trigger points that say, okay, here's where we start winding down and we dial back. And I don't even know if anything like that's ever even been done, Josh. But just a way so that these guys, the momentum is going their way right now, and I really hate to say, oh yeah, and here's a hammer to your kneecaps. But if there would be a way that we could let them continue with their efforts until it starts to really impact this plan.
So-
Today it wouldn't impact the plan.
Well, I might argue that it would, because if I was
Impacts the
looking,
promises.
if I was looking to develop the property to the immediate west, and I'm spending money in due diligence doing that right now, and the city changed the zone on the property immediately adjacent to me to a heavy industrial use, that would affect my calculus in deciding whether and how I wanted to develop that adjacent property, and whether I was willing to continue to rely on the city's plan to make further investments.
So your issue is that the risk is trust.
And the risk is also, we're talking about one property owner, one business owner that can continue to operate. They can continue to do what they've been permitted to do. They had no investment-backed expectations to be able to expand that operation.
I agree with that, I understand that.
While all the surrounding property owners did have expectation and now have expectation in a plan that's been adopted that they could reasonably believe would tell the city council or the planning commission to recommend against that. But on the question of temporary use, we anticipated this question. We do want them to be able to continue to be successful. As I mentioned, they can on their existing acreage. But in terms of having some type of trigger or temporary use on the additional 13 acres, in consultation with our legal team here, we can think of no way that that's really practicable. The only temporary uses we have are uses that are only permitted for a certain amount of time, like 45 days or 90 days. They are granted special permits for those temporary uses, and they're never for a use that isn't permitted in the underlying zone. We would never do a temporary zone change, because once you've really granted somebody a property right by changing a zone, it's not a precedent, it's actually a legal, they have a land use right to that. And by taking that away, you're taking their land use, they're taking value, and that's where the whole questions of property takings come from. But we can't think of any way to say, hey, now you're done and we're going to push you back. Both practical in terms of what happens when it comes to that, and say the business lies in different hands. I'm sure Dan will tell you it never will, but if the person running the business at that time wasn't of a mind to comply, we don't even know how we would begin to enforce.
If it's sold to someone else, you're saying, right?
Yeah, and that once we grant somebody a land use, it's not a revocable kind of agreement.
Even though the intention is to try to revoke it.
Right, because we just don't have any legal.
No, I'm saying you said earlier that the intention is to withdraw that land use permit in the future.
No, we don't intend to take away their right to operate.
But
we intend to take away the option to rezone property to a zone that is clearly not consistent with the plan we just adopted.
No, I'm talking about the 8 acres.
No, we will never take away their 8 acres.
Okay.
I thought
earlier today in your first slide, was it the first slide? You said, I would like to see that.
I would like to see the zone taken off the books so nobody else can come and ask for the zone.
So they can't.
He's
so
not
new
taking
people
it out.
I'm not taking their right to operate
Yeah,
away
so they would be grandfathered in.
forever.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have to deal with, we shouldn't have a zone on the books that's specifically written for an area that the plan tells us specifically we shouldn't be doing that use in that area.
Even though we approved that 4 years ago. I'm talking about the 8 acres.
Right, but we shouldn't have a tool that you can continue to use. We have lots of people that operate under zones that don't exist anymore. We actually, for houses on industrial areas, we reference the 1949 code. So I'm just saying if I don't want my kids to keep planting stuff in my garden, I'm just going to take that option away from them instead of letting them continue to do it until I want to do something else. And we just don't want to provide a tool for people to request that leads us to this situation here where we have to say, well, what do we want to do? You know, what the property owner does or what the plan does. We really shouldn't have that contradiction in our planning philosophy.
Plan has to come first, I agree.
Well, and we should get rid of the tool, the zone that is written, that only applies to the area within the plan that the plan says we shouldn't do. That probably should have been the first thing I should have done after we adopted the plan would say, are there any zones on the books that let you do things here that the plan says absolutely not, and evaluated that. And then we would avoid the conflict of trying to weigh the values between the plan and a zone request. But again, to be clear, I have no animus towards the existing business or the operation or the and wanting to take that zone off the books would simply just to be consistent with and protect the implementation of the plan that's been adopted, and that current operation can continue in perpetuity.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this surrounding area, you wouldn't be able to have that use on anymore, but it's kind of like the zone becomes solely applied to their business.
Correct.
So their business maintains that zone because they're grandfathered in, but any other businesses outside wouldn't be able to start that use.
What's directly to the north of that property? What is that mass?
More the property to the far west. I mean, I can pull up the map and show you, but the farthest west is actually contiguous with the property that comes all the way up and fronts back on 51 across from Evergreen that you did have an application from a couple of years ago to apply the overlay to that we denied. And the city council that you recommended denial, and the city council denied. And immediately to the north, there's a number of other shops and there's storage units.
There's a rental.
Yeah, there's a new equipment rental company that just moved in. It's a hodgepodge currently.
The Nebo bus is not too far north.
All the way up to 16th is the bus
Yeah.
Yeah, the bus depot.
facility.
By the rodeo grounds.
Yeah.
I do.
The only thing I understand everybody's comments, but they already have the permit for the 8 acres. So the developer next to it, he understands that there's a buffer of the 13 acres. But that crushing operation will continue up on the 8 acres. And dust mitigation and everything isn't really gonna change that much by moving it down into that 13 acres. That's just, it's not gonna affect that property as much.
Hey, Dan, if you guys did do what Rod just said, move it back up to the top, and I know you don't like to do this, but if you moved it back up to the top, what would you use the lower 13 for?
Please come to the microphone.
Thanks, Dan.
Otherwise, anybody who's eating popcorn and watching this wouldn't be able to hear you.
Parking trucks. We had cows on it before. We'd like to put those cows back. Yeah,
Okay.
standard.
Would storage be allowed down there? Storage of the material?
No.
No.
No uses that aren't permitted in the underlying LIM zone. Right. I don't have them memorized either, but no, materials processing and storage are unique to the overlay. And even, I'd have to check on like contractor yards and heavy equipment as to whether that's permitted in the underlying zone.
But right now, nothing is on that. Everything on your operation is on permitted property and being operated on that, right? None of it's happening where it's not permitted or not zoned. Is that correct?
No, I would say we are. So
It's all happening down
kind of the backstory on it is the zoning officer came out and said we are in noncompliance. And which sparked a meeting with John Penrod to go back to what was done in the original overlay. We walk in and I already know what it's about. You're good. It is the 600 feet. It's not 1,000. And then sparks the conversation. Hey, let's push this off the hill. He says, all right, get this in the works and get this in the works. Let's get this going. And I will say this. I really am in support of Dry Creek community, master development. But nobody ever came to communicate any of this to us. Nobody came knocked on our door. There's a road that runs through our property. My wife and I have invested literally our life savings in this property. And the future looks very bleak for us in certain situations. The city plans to put a road, major road through our property. Nobody called us. Nobody said, hey, we're talking about doing this. We bought this property in 2007. We were here long before any Dry Creek community. Seems backwards a little bit. Like I said, I'm in support of it. You have two other concrete dispatching companies within close proximity. One's on city property currently. And I mean,
Which one is that, Josh?
That's the Sunrock facility on the Santana that is a month-to-month lease.
Yeah, okay, I knew about that.
Josh, can you speak to the process that the city would go through before doing what he's talking about here, where we have a plan, there's a road that it says it's going to go this trajectory through these properties. What process does the city follow before putting in that road?
First, the road that Dan's mentioned is not a road that the city would ever build. It's a city that would be built if that site develops, that road would be required as part of that development. There are a few roads in this area that the city probably would be proactive about going and constructing, like we have been on 1200 West. And as you're aware, our progress on 1200 West has been halting, if at best.
Stumbling along.
Because of our desire to work with and accommodate property owners. We haven't threatened or exercised eminent domain to obtain any of that property in the case of a vitally important major arterial. But in Dan's case, that diagram is simply saying that as this area develops and as the site develops, there needs to be a local road connection there.
what year do you think they'll plan on punching 1200 West south?
We have funding for it, and we've been delaying the funding because of troubles with the Tintic realignment, that crossing at 12th West and 1600 South. We can't build 12th West, and they actually can't build 1600 South until that crossing gets closed. So we have had money from that. We're actually fully funded from Spanish Fork all the way to 1400 North in Springville to build 1200 West. It's just held up by a number of issues.
Being in the road construction business, I would say it's safe to say we're 10 years before homes or even anywhere remotely close to. I mean, you got to understand, on the big part of the west side is 2 giant irrigation ponds. I would assume that they would use that and to irrigate properties up until last minute. I don't want to speak for anybody, but that's what I would do if I had those water rights. Actually, I do have some, but I do have water rights there, but.
I want some.
Are there further questions?
I don't have any more questions. I just want to make one more statement. I guess I'm looking at someone who's put their life savings into a business, and I just personally think that dirt is better off where it's at than it is closer to the highway. And I wish there was some kind of accommodation that we could make, or some minds changed, I guess. I don't know.
So, Josh, it sounds like maybe you talked with Chris and others about accommodations, and that's where your answer to mine for the temporary permitting came into play. You guys couldn't come up with any other ideas for a temporary fix, because it's just like I said. I mean, it's just tough to see us come in and just take this opportunity out.
I understand that, but it also
Logically, I know.
we're not taking anyone's opportunity.
We are. When you
Well,
when
they
you
never-
think about it from from a hearts and minds perspective,
Perhaps.
we are. From a strategic perspective, no. I mean,
If I owned a business, I would want to make sure that I had zoning in place before I made plans to invest. But from a hearts and minds perspective, yeah, and I understand, it's a very compelling narrative that a lot of money and we have a lot of people employed here and it's a Springville family. But no, John's words were essentially, if that's something that wants to be pursued, we'd have to bring in some outside counsel and spend a bunch more effort kind of figuring out if there was a tenable way to do that. But that generally under state land use code, once somebody has the right to do something, they perpetually have that right. But we're willing to do the work and dig in. It really comes back to the initial question in the slides, and would be my recommendation to preserve the integrity of the planning process is that if there is an inclination to try to accommodate the request, that we go through the process of amending the plan to do that if there's not a way to accommodate it on a temporary basis, and that we go through that due diligence before making the determination on our recommendation on the legislative action of changing the zone.
How would you amend the plan?
Same way we adopted the plan.
Not process, like, what would you change in the plan?
I don't know.
So
Fair
it
enough.
would require a continuing again of this.
There's a number of ways you could handle it. You could make a recommendation to the city council to deny the proposed amendment, but recommend that the council direct staff to reevaluate the Dry Creek Community Plan. You could make a recommendation to the city council to approve the requested zone map amendment with direction to staff, or with direction to the council that you want that to be on a temporary basis with certain triggers or criteria for its continuing use or its cessation. And we could go and do that work and present those options to the council. Or you could obviously continue the item. If you choose to continue the item, I would want to make sure we have some clear direction from the commission to staff as to what you'd like us to accomplish before bringing the item back.
And if this was to go through the process and city council denied, would they have to wait a time period before bringing the request back?
Yes,
What
there
is
is.
that time period? Just making sure that you've memorized the entire code book.
I don't even know how much money is in my budget. Like Bruce, our finance director, he says, I keep my numbers in a spreadsheet. Troy can remember things in his head, but Bruce says, don't ask me. I keep it in the spreadsheet. So I'm just pulling that up here.
yeah, Bruce is a liar, so
Yeah.
make sure that's on record.
That's on record.
Bruce has a tough job.
That fits in with the
He
rain
does have
cloud
a tough
aesthetic.
job. You got the toughest job out there.
Zoning. Municipal planning. The phone interface is not quite as elegant. I could find it pretty quick on the website. I know it's at least procedure for amendments. Okay.
While he's looking that up, I think it's interesting also what Rod brought up, that in a place like Portland, in order to accommodate these things, they have almost a centralized place.
Maybe.
It sounds like, anyway, to accommodate surrounding areas to help out. And I think it's interesting that's there and it's acceptable, and they take the appropriate measures to keep it clean and nice. And so I think
There's also a cement batch plant in the pit.
it's what?
There was also a cement batch plant right in the pit, along with the pit. So they're crushing the product to use for their cement operation.
Yeah.
And you can drive, and there's, housing all around it. You can drive right by it. They have the same sound barrier fencing that these guys have put up, and you can't hear. I mean, yeah, there's traffic moving on and off the road, but you can't hear it. It's not, if you were to stand across the road, you can't, it's not so loud that it's unbearable to live in that area, and it's not a bad situation.
I mean, if there's, if there are examples out there like that, and,
They're all
and
over
the
the
fact that,
country.
the fact
They
that,
have, but they don't have the fence all the way around, right?
These guys
Not
do.
right now.
No, I'm saying
Not
right now
they
they
don't.
wouldn't.
yeah,
So they don't,
they would
I
have to,
mean,
something we'd have to require if we
maybe you put the
did it.
stipulation out that they put a barrier fence there
Yeah.
when the development
Yeah.
begins. I mean, I think there's a way to accommodate everybody.
That's what I'd like to see too, but I just try to figure out how to, one, honor the fact that others have applied and been denied.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's-
That's a tough one.
You know,
But at the same time, if we could have some way to help a business be successful, because we've all been, I mean, all of us have had experiences with our families and other things. I mean, my great-grandfather came home and they had put a railroad right through his property. That's called Woods Cross now.
Yeah.
I just
So
think that
that's the difficult part, is to try to find out how do you develop, how do you grow without impacting different people. I think that's the challenge.
when we always talk about, trying to attract businesses, and, we have one here that's thriving, that employs a lot of people, and if we could find some way to accommodate, and I'm not sure exactly what proposal to make with that and what we could agree upon, but if there was anything that we could do, I think we have a wonderful business in our community that I would hate to see go away at this time.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying they want them to go away or that we don't like them.
Sure.
We're just trying to say, at least in my opinion, in my view, is that if the situation is we've denied it before and we've come to this place before, we have a challenge to say, well, is this what's different about this? And if we could find some way to accommodate, then I think that would be great, but I'm just.
I
And the
think
two
that
Let me ask you this, Josh. Could we make a recommendation that they be able to use that property for their crushing and stockpiling operation for the period of time that it would take for us to come back with some additional regulations that would mitigate issues with the existing property line so that they could continue their growth and operation, but it could also be conducive to the owners that are looking to buy this property?
That's probably a good question for
Chris was chewing his
legal. I mean,
fingernails.
it again is this has happened so much lately. Not with something, but if you look, you mentioned I looked across the street and it looks really bad. There's a property owner across the street that decided he should use his property before he went through the process, and kind of abate enforcement because they made an application or they're going through the process of a rezone. It's become such an issue that we're kind of thinking about, should we make everybody come into compliance before they make an application? Should we not accept applications on properties that are being used illegally? I don't know, but the property is being used illegally, whether that's good or bad or whatever, and whether or not you as the Planning Commission can sanction that, I don't know. That's a question for Chris.
I think we'd have to be careful about not being equal to parties.
that's
We're-
my
we'll
I
help you, we won't
understand,
help
but
you.
here's the reason I bring that up, and we've all brought this up, saying this is a thriving business. These people are willing to work with the city to help their business to continue to grow. And there's no reason for us to take a hard line in the sand where we can't kind of offer some kind of a solution to where their business can grow, and yet we can maintain the integrity of the existing zoning law. There's got to be some way we can work through this as good partners to where they are able to use and utilize that property, and yet we can maintain the integrity of what we're trying to do with the Dry Creek property.
Hey, Chris-
We
Chris-
have
Let's
had
let
an,
Attorney
Yeah,
Kerr
let's let Chris answer that question, and then, because there are really two issues we're talking about, right? One is the plan, which trumps everything, and two is other people have been turned down, which is,
yeah.
you know,
that- That's
it's
opening
terrible.
us up
That's-
to
so
a whole amount of
these are my
liability
two
that we're being capricious.
walls that I'm trying to figure out how we get through.
So we've asked a question. I'd like to.
My
hear the
suggestion
answer.
would be tonight that you have one issue, one vote before you. These other issues would need to be considered at another time in another place, probably another meeting. You kind of have a scope tonight of just saying, you can discuss all these things and make whatever decision you want to make, but the decision that you make is to either vote on it and vote yes or no on the questions that are before you. If you want to bring it back, if you want to continue it to have some other meeting to have discussion, that's always a possibility. I think you don't want to go outside the scope of what your meeting is for tonight. And then if you want to make another meeting for some time later to have these kind of discussions, maybe have just kind of a work session to talk through these kind of things. It would also be kind of a legislative decision for the city council to consider. So these are all much bigger questions than the big question you have to face just tonight. That would be my advice.
Thank you.
Well, and if there's a substantive change, then they can reapply sooner, isn't that correct? So if there was a change in the plan or zone or
What have you been able to
requirements.
So I found it, it's 11.7.103 subsection 2, that denial of an application to amend the zoning map to reclassify any parcel of property shall prohibit the filing of another application to amend the zoning map to reclassify the same parcel of property or any portion thereof to the same zone classification within 1 year of the date of the final denial by the municipal council of the previous application, unless the Planning and Zoning Review Committee finds that there has been a substantial change in the circumstances or sufficient new evidence as submitted by the applicant in writing since the denial of the previous application to merit consideration within the 1 year time period.
Okay.
So a change to the plan would be a substantive.
I think that would be a substantive
It
change.
could be considered a substantive
Okay.
change.
So I think that means that we have three different options to take tonight. We can either move to recommend approval, move to recommend denial, or we can move to continue the item. Do we have a motion from the commission along any of those lines?
I would move that we table the item to continue in a working session so we can work with the company to come up with a solution to where both parties can be agreeable.
Before a second comes in,
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned that if we move to continue, you need to have a clear direction on where to go, right? So in my mind though, I mean, I think everybody's here is kind of wrapping their head around this thing and trying to, do the right thing for the city and for the business. So my question is, before a second comes in on that, is without direction from the commission, is direction of us sitting down and having a work session with staff, I'm talking about, with staff, not with the business. I don't agree with that piece of it. Just with staff, where we sit down, we really kind of drill as deep as we can on this thing and at least help us, because right now we're a divided group, I think, and help us really come to some, understand it enough that we can come to an agreement on something that makes sense. Is that direction?
That's not a what do you call the kind of questions that aren't meant to actually be answered? That's a real question, right?
That's a real question.
Okay.
The question is that direction enough that we come back with a work session with the staff?
That is direction. That seems to be different than how I would have interpreted the motion that was just made. So if there needs to be discussion on the motion.
That's fine, we can reword it, but the intent is that we come back and discuss what will be workable to keep the integrity of the city and the zoning ordinance intact, but also to allow the expansion of this company so that they can grow, add more jobs, bring in more income to the city, and make it so that both parties can come out and be happy with the end result.
And when we talk about the integrity of the city, we need to take into account the neighbors or other businesses that
talking,
have been
yeah,
denied,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been
Then I
denied.
would recommend that you withdraw your motion and
I'll withdraw my
restate.
motion,
Restate your motion so that it's
and I'll
more
restate
clear.
the motion.
Yeah.
Here is it clear. I recommend that we table,
Not table, continue.
that we continue the review of the ordinance change or the zoning change for Western Paving Concrete and have a working session with staff in order for us to be able to help the city maintain the integrity of the Dry Creek development and also to allow Western Paving to expand their business and continue to operate on their existing property.
I'd second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Let's do a roll call on this one. I think otherwise the ayes and the nays may be a little bit harder to distinguish. So go with Commissioner Nelson.
Give that an affirmative.
Okay.
Aye.
Nay.
Did you say aye?
Said
Oh, okay. Aye, nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So I believe that means motion passes, if my math at 9 o'clock is correct.
Do you, if there are no objections to that, both to satisfy the surrounding property owners and neighbors, and also to be able to provide clear direction to our enforcement staff, I would recommend.
You can add the amendment that they are invited to the session. Also.
Right. Well, we can't meet in the we can't have a closed meeting, so they'll be here. My concern was to put a specific date to it right now. So I would recommend that this comes back on the 26th. It's already been continued a number of meetings to this point, so I'd just like to continue the process moving forward.
Will that give you enough time to bring back maybe some suggestions that?
We'll try our best. If it has to be continued on our account, then I'm okay with taking responsibility for that. But at least right now, I'd like to plan on the 26th.
It's fine.
Josh, could I ask a question too? Is it possible for the applicant to modify or to maybe enhance some of the proposals that they have as far as, you know what I mean? We've talked about several issues about trying to find ways that they could say, okay, this is, I realize that once the land is granted that use, it can be, but there could be things like fencing around it or something like that that may enhance and mitigate some of those challenges that we've talked about. Like, I think what Rod said was real appealing about what's going on in Portland, but we're not in that same situation. But if we could emulate that, then that might be something that we could feel good about trying to approve or move forward with. Can they modify that, or is this?
They can modify the request, but that would not accomplish the aim you're stating. What would need to happen for that to occur would be to amend the business licensing regulations or the zoning code to add additional regulations. Because even if the applicant proffered that, hey, if we can have this rezoned, we'll do A, B, C, and D, unless that was either reflected in the zoning code or memorialized in some type of development agreement, we wouldn't have any ability to enforce those provisions.
I just wondered if it was worth it to withdraw the application in the sense that, because if we have to wait a year after that, if there was some way of making that happen, because.
And that is always the applicant's prerogative. You've had a number of rezones come to you that you recommended denial that never made it to the city council for that specific reason.
Okay.
Because they didn't have confidence that they would get a yes, and they didn't want to.
Wait the year.
Right.
So to add on to what Ralph said though, is can we offer those suggestions that if you will do this, well, that would be changing the whole zoning, so it's not.
I mean, you could. You absolutely could direct staff that these are things that would help us feel more comfortable, but we would have to go through the process of amending the zone or the business license to do those. Or there may be an ability to enter into a specific development agreement, but we'd really rather not. And that development agreement, because it constitutes a land use regulation, would still have to go through the process of the same process as if we change the zone based on recent state precedent.
Sure, because we don't want to be here again in 2 years doing this again.
Right.
Can I also request that we have the information on the applicant that we denied and the reasoning for why they were denied?
Yes. I will, that may have predated the video, but I can get you the minutes and I can get you the recording and the staff report. I can give you all of the relevant materials.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And anyone who wants to see those, the minutes and the staff reports and everything are just available on our website. You have to make a records request for the recording.
No. Sometimes it helps to call and ask where you're looking for.
Yeah.
November of 22 or. it
Yeah,
can
I
take a
couldn't
little
find
while
some minutes
otherwise.
today I was looking for, so even for us that are used to it, it's a little tricky.
It
And
is.
we're always happy to help.
Any further questions? Or do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for giving.